Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. I've learned over the years it's a lot harder to speak in front of people that know you than it is in front of people that don't know you. So my wife Tammy's in the back. She's got my literature. I'd appreciate it if you'd grab a piece. If you're another candidate, they're $1. Everybody else, they're free. So I want to talk to you tonight about a couple things. I've had the topics up there for a while. So I'm going to talk about a brief history of time, my time, not your time. 4 jobs in an election, a fork in the road. You're going to find that very interesting because I'm going to tell you a story tonight that I've never told anybody before. A board which is dumber than itself. You're going to love. I love that slide. That's my favorite topic. Some of the highlights and lowlights over the last 12 years, and then I'll give you some tips for what I think you should do to evaluate candidates at all levels. This talk tonight is only going to be about 10% about I'm a trustee and I'm running for re-election and why I think I would deserve your vote. It's going to be mostly about why our government is broken and why we need change at all levels. So first thing I start with, it's not my family. That's my Ohio family. You know what's really cool about that picture? When I put a picture like that up there and then I put a picture of me afterwards, everybody says, wow, he's pretty good looking. So my why is public service is my passion. Whether that is public service as an elected official, whether that is public service as a volunteer, in any way, it's what I like doing and it's what our family does. So I want to introduce my family briefly. My wife Tammy, what I know about, let me start this thought. This was funny too. Any marriage can have one crazy person and only one crazy person in it. Tammy is calm, level-headed, and she's the calm one. So I'm the crazy one. There's a couple over here, and they're looking at each other saying, it's not me. My daughter, Allie, on the right. Allie's in the back, and Allie is very interested in politics. She reads the papers. She's always interested in what's going on in the meetings, and she asks me frequently, can I come to the meeting? And I usually say, well, you can't because they often go too late and I can't leave the meeting to take you home. But in truth be told, half of the reason is that those meetings are not suitable for children. So the last time, Allie was here the last time for the last meeting, and we're driving home and we're talking about how if she could vote, she could vote for 4 trustees. And I said, honey, who would you vote for? And she said, well, Mr. Schnetler, Mr. Kermey, Mr. Heitman, and Mr. Dempsey. Thank God she's only 12.
I think she's brilliant.
Okay, I want to tell you about my start in politics. Some of you know this, some of you don't. In 2004, 5 days before the filing deadline was the first time that I actually thought about running for office. And what happened was that Ron Edwards was ticked off at Chuck Kermey and Abe Munkford, and he was looking for somebody that he could get behind because he wanted those guys off the board. So a mutual friend contacted me and said, I had never met Ron before, and a mutual friend contacted me and he said, have you ever thought about running for office? I said, absolutely. The next day I talked to my wife. On Friday I met with Ron. Over the weekend we collected signatures. On Tuesday was the filing deadline. I didn't even know the job paid until after I filed. So there's a couple of things I want to talk about relative to that. First is, so Allie was newborn. Tammy always says I ran for office as an excuse to get out of changing diapers. That is not true. But I was new. There were 4 incumbents. There were 14 people that ran. I finished second. There's 2 things that I want you to take away from this point. First is that I was an insider. I was part of the inside group. Second thing is that for those of you that are new candidates and you've never ran for office before, if you're thinking, well, you don't have a chance with this many candidates, that's not true, and I'm living proof of that. So then what happens? I'm trying to, oh, dang it. That was a great joke. I was going to say, so I worked very hard to get the endorsement of this woman. It's a hard endorsement to get, and but once you have it, it's solid. Done. That was a great one.
Forever and ever.
So in 2008, I asked my family, could I run again? The initial reaction was at the top. The second reaction was the family got together and said yes. The main issue with 2008 was, I'll say fire reform was the main issue, and I was behind fire reform, and to this day, I still believe that we needed fire reform. However, as I'll explain to you later, it went too far. There were 3 incumbents. I finished second out of 5, and I remained an insider. 2012, that term was full of controversies. Family got older. Controversies, a long list of controversies. And as I prepared for this the last couple of months, and I started thinking about the basis for those controversies, it will lead me to a few stories that I will tell you shortly. But there were 3 incumbents, and I finished first out of 13 people, but I became an outsider. And I'm going to explain why shortly. And when I tell you the story about the fork in the road, then you will understand the reason why. So 2016, a new day, 3 incumbents, 10 candidates. I want you to notice that insider is red, outsider is red, neither is green, right? What does that mean? That means we don't need insiders and we don't need outsiders. We need 7 independent thinkers, because here's what happens. If you're an insider or an outsider, it's black or white with this government. You're an insider, you go along to get along. You're informed, you have access to people and information, and you get some compromises, small ball compromises. You get an occasional pat on the head, and you get a bone thrown to you. But on the big things, you are either with me or you're against me. End of discussion. When you're an outsider, you vote your conscience, you're misled, you're misinformed. There are moats and walls around, and there is no compromise. And there are no gray areas. And I know this because I have sat in both seats. Is this the kind of government you want? Is this the kind of government you deserve? So what is your passion? In young people today, when rather than millennials, rather than talk about, rather than ask each other what you do, they ask each other, what is your passion? What drives you? What change do you want to make to the world? And I essentially have 4 jobs. My main job that pays the bills is that I'm a manager of senior level network engineers in this company. There's a leadership team of about 11 people. We're located out on the West Coast. What's interesting about this, hang on a second. Is that in my day job, basically the engineers that work for me and the other managers that work in the division are very senior, 25 years or more, very high paid. There's a lot of conflict, but it's healthy conflict. It's constructive conflict. It's because you're working towards a common goal. People are skilled, they're trustworthy, they respect their customers, they respect the vendors, they respect the employees, and they respect each other. It's a healthy organization, and I like going to work every day, especially because I work at home. My second job, what's your passion, is that I'm VP and General Counsel at the park, and I'm one of the founders of Park. It's a leadership team of 6. We have conflict, we have healthy conflict. We have highly skilled and trustworthy people. We respect our customers, our vendors, our employees, and we respect each other. I enjoy it. It's a fun place to go to work. I'm also the treasurer of the Plymouth Scholars parent organization. Leadership team of 8. We're seeing a pattern? See where I'm going with this? Highly skilled and trustworthy. Healthy conflicts. We find common ground. We respect our customers, our vendors, our employees, we don't have any, and each other. But why doesn't this happen in the Plymouth Township Board? How can you have a guy that stands up here and says 75% of his life he works in an environment where you have highly skilled, you have healthy conflict, and you get into Plymouth Township and it's the exact opposite? How can that be? Is it the guy or is it the environment? I'm going to explain. I'll explain to that. But first, as I've been thinking about the last 12 years, and I've been thinking about the why, I think about where I started, where I'm at today, and how things got to be the way they are. And I realized that there was a point in time in which, for me, it became a fork in the road. And that was in August 2012. The night of the election, in the August primary, the August primary was essentially a referendum on fire. There were fire candidates, fire-sponsored candidates. A lot of you didn't like me at all. And you didn't like me because I was an insider and I was in favor of fire reform. Carol's one of them. I get it. I totally get it. So what happens in the night of August, the August primary 2012, was that we swept it. We had all of the fire reform candidates, all the way from the top down, swept it. That evening, all 7 of the victors had stopped by Papa Romano's for a party. And some of you were there. The party broke up, and there were only 3 of us left, and it was myself and Richard Ram and Ron Edwards. And I asked the question. We were sitting at a table, we were having a beer, and I asked the question. I said, what happens to fire now? The conversation that ensued made it very clear to me that there was going to be hell to pay. I became very uncomfortable. The next day, actually Shannon showed up about a half hour later. A bunch of us went out to Plymouth. I didn't drive home. The next day I woke up, had a headache, and I really began to reassess. And I began to ask myself, I felt dirty. I felt ashamed. And the reason I felt dirty and ashamed was that I go through life and I like to think that I try my best to be one of the good guys. And good guys don't retaliate. Good guys forgive, they forget, and they move on. But what this group is all about is retaliation. They retaliate against employees, they retaliate against residents, they retaliate against vendors, against businesses, you name it. It's all about retaliation. And that's what this was about, and I was ashamed. Because at that point in time, I began to think about it. I had a very serious conversation with myself, and I asked myself, do I want to continue to be the man that others want me to be, or do I want to start being the man that I want to be? And it was at that moment in time that I began to pull away. Remember what I said about insiders and outsiders. As soon as you start to pull away and you don't go along anymore, you're an outsider. You're out. End of discussion, you are out. You no longer have access to information. You no longer have a voice. You are, I was going to talk about, you're a pariah. So, why? Why is that? There are volumes. There's a, you can find a whole row in this library of books and materials written about what makes great leaders. But outstanding leaders, great leaders, have really two things in common among all the other traits, but there are two that I've always recognized about outstanding leaders throughout my course. The first is that leaders make as many mistakes and as many bad decisions as any of us do. But what makes them good leaders is the fact that they can recognize their mistakes and change course. And they're the first ones to recognize that was a bad decision, and so they change course. The second trait that great leaders have is a strong moral compass. They want to do right, not be right. They will do right, not be right, and the people that follow them because they know that. They know that that leader, given a choice between doing right and being right, will choose doing right every single time. And this is the problem. I can give you example after example after example of where you've read controversies in the newspaper. You see controversies. They always boil back down to these two fundamental issues. Refusal to change course when it was clear that there was a bad decision made, and a lack of a moral compass. And that is what's wrong in Township Hall, is that the three of them will sit around and they'll look at each other, and not one of them will say, "This is wrong. Where is the moral compass? This is wrong. The things they do are wrong." And none of them ever challenge each other. Is this the government you want? Is this the government you deserve? We need change, and we need change at all levels, and this is the reason why it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you change 3 trustees. The administration at Township Hall fundamentally is flawed because of these reasons. So I want to just use the one example of Doroshewitz. Doroshewitz is it's a textbook example of where they refused to change course when it was very clear that this property was acquired as a result of a series of clerical errors, and nobody ever wanted to do right. It was way more important to that board to be right than it was to do right. This went so much better when I practiced alone.
Fine.
Uh-oh.
You broke it. You're going to have to win.
Oh.
Did you have a blank scratch?
I don't know.
There you go.
Okay. Interesting slide. This is my favorite one, actually. 93%. You want to take a guess? I'll tell you what it means. If you went back over the last 4 years and you looked at my voting record, you would find that I voted with the majority 93% of the time. 1 out of 20 times, I don't agree. 1 out of 20 times. That makes me an outsider, makes me a troublemaker, a grandstander. 1 out of 20 times. 93%. 93%. This quote is great, this second one. I was at a seminar not long ago, and the guy was talking about, it was a seminar called Fuel Leadership Detroit. It was really good. And what one of the speakers was talking about was a dysfunctional board or leadership team is often one which they describe as being the board is dumber than itself. And what it means is that together, the board makes worse decisions than if anybody had to make those decisions alone. Because when you have to make those decisions alone, you're held accountable for them, and you have to be able to stand up and explain them. But as long as you're a board and you're making bad decisions one after another, it wasn't my fault, it was the other guy's fault. I didn't make that decision, we made that decision. But what happens is, in that case, it's a certainty. It is a certainty that a board or a committee or a leadership team that is constructed in that way will always be dysfunctional. Poor decisions are a certainty. Okay. Defining moments that shaped my thinking. I already told you about the fire story, about the fork in the road. A couple other things I reflected back and I pulled out. This one I think is actually, it's a pretty good metaphor. So when we were building Township Hall, I joined the board after the decision was made, and we were at the point in time when we were meeting with architects and we were designing a building. And I went along with the plans. I had a lot of input. I was an insider, so my input was asked for. And I remembered at one meeting I said something, and I didn't realize it at the time, but years later I look back and I understand how prophetic it was. And what I said was, I think the boardroom is too small and the private offices are too big, right? So think about that. Boardroom is too small, private offices are too big. How true? The boardroom, which is really the modern day Boston Common, where the citizens get up, express their opinions, want to be heard from their government, usually barely has a seat for, it doesn't hold more than 50 people? And half the time it's overflowing. Private offices are huge, and they're separated. And they're at one end of the building. To get to the supervisor's office, you have to swim a moat and climb over 2 barbed wires and go through 2 secretaries before you can get there. And the supervisor is as far away as possible from the clerk. It is not physically possible for the supervisor to be any farther away from the clerk. The treasurer, at least he's got visibility into his office, so you can watch out, and I'll give him that. But I'll tell you something really interesting. Mark Zuckerberg, who's the founder and CEO of Facebook, one of the richest people in the world, he actually sits in an open office. And he feels that he can swing his chair around and talk to one of his executives. It's collaborative. People have to get along because they're sitting in an open office together. And yet, what a beautiful metaphor for the way our township government works. The electeds separate themselves. What happens after every meeting? They take off for the back room. The electeds separate themselves. The boardroom is separate, and the rabble is kept separate from the rest of the people. Right? Okay. We talked about fire reform, July 4th events. Learn the hard way. These are political. Township park projects. I'm almost out of time here, and I want to let Mark speak, so I only got one more slide. So what happens in 2012 to 16, the township park projects, and in and of itself, some of them weren't so bad of an idea, right? What happened with that pavilion was, originally that was presented to the board as an $80,000 plan to put drinking fountains and bathrooms up on the hill so that the baseball teams had those facilities, right? Absolutely, great idea, went along with it. Then the price escalated. Next it was $260,000, but we're going to have some nice bathrooms. And I still went along with it. And the point is, the price kept going up and up and up, but the voters were told $260,000. Next thing we know, we're borrowing $650,000. Nobody knows how much that thing cost. Particularly, nobody is able to account for the staff time. nobody is able to account for the 5,000 here, the 10,000 here, and so on. But what I learned with those projects is that the public and the dissenting voice on the board were completely shut out of the picture. Nobody asked the folks that live near the park whether they want an amphitheater. Nobody asked the residents in general whether they want an amphitheater. The public was completely shut out, and it became a defining moment because I would sit up there meeting after meeting and say, why are you so insecure that you cannot even entertain a dissenting voice? I just want to point out some things that are wrong with the plan. It doesn't make sense. But you're an outsider. Okay, I've harped on that theme enough. Elections as mandates. This is another misunderstanding. As I'd indicated earlier, many of you know that in 2012, the 7 cool kids, sorry about that, I was joking, won, swept the elections, but it was misperceived that this becomes a mandate. It wasn't a mandate. It was a majority of the voters that came out to vote during the August primary, which was only 25% of the population. It certainly does not give the board a mandate to do anything they feel like doing, but this was perceived as a mandate. And this is why, time and time again, as you saw opposition, as you saw criticism of potential projects, that it was dismissed because we got a mandate. Voters put us in office. Elections are not mandates. Positive note, my association with Park, my association with the volunteer stuff I do, my association with running the picnic. Some of you may know that my wife Tammy and I ran the picnic for 3 years. And during that time, we sacrificed a lot personally, but we were happy to do that. But what I learned through all of these, and this is why community service becomes my passion, is that you really get to meet the good people in the community when you do these things. I've upgraded my friends. And it's not the politicians, it's not the people that earn their living working for government. It is the good people in the community that are willing to come out and give of themselves and ask for nothing in return. It's a beautiful thing, and it's a wonderful thing to live here and see that in droves. It's amazing. All right, this is my last slide. I'm right on time. I was rushing a little bit. There was something on my first slide I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to come back to it real quick. And it said elephants, and there were some Wordle things about that. Unfortunately, Plymouth Township is probably more outside the norm in terms of gossip and rumors and things that people say about each other to slander each other, particularly during elections. So these are the elephants in the room. I want you to help me slay the elephants. And the way that you do that is ask. Put the question out on social media. I'll answer it. I'll answer any question. Because what happens is you get these whisper campaigns, and we know where a lot of them originate, and you get these whisper campaigns, and there's people in the room right now that are probably thinking, wow, I wonder if Bob got those problems with the IRS worked out that I've heard he had. Right? Slay the elephants, ask the questions. There is most topics there's nothing off limit. I was going to make a joke there, but okay. So you're going to evaluate candidates, right? Here's what I recommend you do. You really got one question. You can ask every question, every candidate. Issues are important. Don't get me wrong. However, yesterday's issues are not today's issues, and today's issues are not going to be tomorrow's issues, right? So these are all important issues, and I don't mean to suggest that you should not study up on them and know where the candidates stand, but you really got to know the candidate, because you're not voting for an issue, you're voting for a person. And that's what the difference is, right? So what you should do is you should ask every trustee candidate, what do you think the role of the trustee is? It's up to you to decide whether the answer is one that you find sufficient to support them. Oops. Oh.
No whoopses.
Okay, here's my answer. I think that every person on that board, 7 people, ought to be able to compartmentalize issues and vote for each issue as though it stands alone, as though you have no other issue to vote on it during your entire term. 93% of the time, I voted with the majority. 1 out of 20 times, I said, nope, I don't like this. But I compartmentalized, right? I didn't trade votes. I don't believe that if I have a position and I'm trying to persuade one of my colleagues of my position, if I'm not successful, that's okay, so long as they're against me for the right reasons. And if I am successful, I only want them with me if they're with me for the right reasons. Not because they think they have to, not because they're afraid of retaliation if they don't go along. So that's number one. Can you compartmentalize issues? Do you have the courage to stand alone? Because sometimes you do. Sometimes you are alone. Are you going to do your homework? Financial analysis is not reviewing a stack of invoices and signing off, initialing here, yep, he reviewed the bills, therefore he did the financial analysis. Bull. Financial analysis is asking the deep questions. You don't have to be a financial person, but it's asking the deep questions and not taking the superficial answer. Challenging the thinking. Remember what I said about functional work teams. A work team is functional when it can have healthy conflict. It's okay to challenge the decisions, right? It's okay to challenge the status quo. That's what you need in your candidates. And last, I guess I'll wrap it up with you got to be willing to stand behind your decisions in a public discussion. Some of you were there when Price got appointed supervisor last year. And I was angry, but you know what I was angry about? Actually, truth be told, I didn't want the job. As I was leaving, my wife said to me, what are you going to do if they give you the job? I said, don't worry, they're not going to give it to me. But the reason I was angry was because, was it 5 people? 4 people voted for him, and not a single person offered a sentence of justification for their decision. Not one. The most important decision that they made in their 4-year term, and nobody even had the courage to stand up and say, I voted for him because I like his tie. They gave nothing. So, let's wrap up. Let's talk about the candidates. Again, pick character over credentials. You can see my credentials. Tammy's got the literature. I've got them. But don't vote for me because of my credentials. Vote for me because you think I have the character. You pick the right person, and the person will make good decisions. Pick the wrong person, and we'll continue to have what we have. And lastly, ask those questions. If you want to know the issues, they are, it's important to ask where individuals stand on the issues. But lastly, ask this question about what is the role of the trustee or the role of the board member more than anything else. Okay. Thank you.